Alright, so we're going to start our very first actual assignment. And if you remember from all the stuff we've done in class, the first thing we need to do is we need to copy our preferences. So I have my two windows open. The window on my right is the Documents Maya folder. And this is my preference folder that's already inside Maya, so I'm going to delete that. Delete. I'm actually just going to rename it because this is my personal computer. Renaming it will do the same thing. It'll just like ignore this version, and I'm going to copy my new one in. So just control drag my new one in here. Okay, or I can right click and go to copy, and then right click and go to paste, and that will also copy it and paste it. Okay, that way I know I still have one here and I still have one here. Okay, so now I can go through and open up Maya 2014. Alright, cool. So now let's create our project. So I'm going to go to File, Project Window, New, and I'm going to call this Desk Scene, or not Desk Scene, Desk Sarcona. Okay. The area it's going to go, I'm going to click on the folder and go back to my desktop. I'm going to my D drive on my desktop because it's like a fake drive, but you're going to go to the D drive on your computer and go to your 2510 folder, go to your work folder, and hit select. Okay, so now it's going to go inside my D drive, Sarcona 2510 work, and I hit accept. There we go. Alright, so now we can just save our scene as desk startup Sarcona _ V01. Alright, so now we're going to start modeling this thing. So the way we're going to do this is we're basically modeling a desk, and there's a great accompanying tutorial to this too, which is desk Maya modeling, and I think it's like the first one. There it is, reading table, so it's further down, so they call it a reading table instead of a desk. So this is like the old version of Maya 2008. Everything still applies. Everything's going to be pretty much the same. So there's a couple, this thing here you can read through and basically get more information about what we're doing. But essentially we're going to be creating a little reading desk, book, chair, and some other stuff. So everything in this assignment is going to be created with polygons. So we're going to use all the polygon tools here, not all of them, but a lot of them. So I'm just going to go to create polygons cube, and I'm going to hit F to frame it. I'm going to hit 5 to shade it. Okay, I'm going to go to the scale tool, which is R, and I'm going to scale it down. I'm not going to tell you the shortcut keys every single time, alright, but eventually you'll get to know those. Okay, alright, so I'm basically scaling this up. The size of that desk, like what is the actual dimension of that desk. If I go to the end result of this, there we go, here's the end result. This top area here is what we're building first, okay? And there's, you know, when you model something, there's like 100 different ways to model it. So I'm basically laying out, okay, what's the thickness of this desk, what's the width of it, what's the depth of it. Okay, I can change some of these things later, but I'm just going to stick to something about there. Okay, I'm not giving you values. Okay, you can look at the values here if you wanted to, but you're not gonna. It's not gonna help you. All right, your best guess is to use your eye. Look at how proportionate it is. Okay, if I told you to draw a human and there's 6 centimeters this way and 3 centimeters that way, and 12 centimeters this way, it's not going to help you. Looking at the proportions of a human helps you understand those things. Okay, so there's my desk. I'm going to go to my polycube inputs in the channel box. And remember, if you don't have the channel box, you can just cycle between these two tabs. You could also come up here and use these buttons here, and these will turn different things on and off. You can just hover your mouse over it. It'll show you what they're going to do. Okay, and the far right one is show hide channel box. Alright, so here's the polycube. I'm going to go in with my width, and I need 2 divisions going that way, And in my depth, I need 2 divisions going that way. So it looks like we have a tic-tac-toe board, okay? And those add divisions all the way around. So now what I need to do is, this is where the legs are going to be pulled out. Okay, imagine the bottom of this though, not the top. We're looking at the top. If I look at this Y direction, it's facing up. If I hit the move tool, this Y is facing up, so this is the top. This is the bottom, alright? But either way, it's going to be the same thing. I need to isolate where I'm going to pull the legs out. So we're going to hold down the right mouse button on the object, and I'm going to go to Edge. Okay, and this lets me select edges. This is kind of like hitting, alright, so it's the same thing as going to F8. So if I were to go and hit F8, you can see that now I'm in component mode, and I can grab the points. But if I switch points off, I switch the edges on, now I can grab the edges. Okay, so right clicking and going here, or hitting F8 and choosing it from this menu is pretty much the same thing. The only real difference is when I right click and I go to edge, this is more of like a temporary mode. So if I want to get back out of this, I can right click and go to object mode. Okay, so you have to just not just right click, but hold the right mouse button down and then go to edge. Alright, so anyway, so we want to get these edges selected. So I'm going to double click this edge here, and that selects that edge all the way around. Now I could move this over here, but I don't really know how far I've moved it, and so if I go to move this one, how far am I going to move that one over, right? Okay, so we're going to do a little trick. So I'm going to double click this edge, hold down shift, double click this edge, and that gives me, I want to make sure that I don't have anything else selected. I don't. Okay, I can even go to wireframe and just make sure I have those 2 edges, those 2 edge loops selected. Okay, I switch to, let me flip back over, I was upside down. Switch to my scale tool, and I'm just going to grab the blue scale manipulator, okay, or whichever one is facing the long direction, and I'm just going to scale this out. Okay, and you can see how I moved both of those at the same time in that direction. So now I'm going to do the same thing going the other way. I'm going to double click this edge, hold down shift, double click that edge. Let me change my background color just so it makes it maybe a little easier for you to see that. Yeah, I think that one's probably the best one. Okay, and same thing, except I'm going to go in a different direction. I can't go this way because it's going to bow my table. Okay, I can't go in the Y direction because it's going to cause a weird rippling. I don't want to go in the middle because it'll do it to all 3. So I want to just grab the red direction and scale it out. Okay, and then from the top-ish view, you don't have to go to an actual top view. I'm just looking at the top of this and seeing, does it look proportionate? Is it like this, where this is more rectangle, or is it like that? We want to have it pretty much square. Okay, no one's going to be taking a ruler to this, so as long as it looks square to us, we should be good. And I think it does. Alright, so we can hit 5 to get back into shaded mode. Right click on it and hold, go to object mode, and then we can click on it, and there we are. Okay, so now we have the first step of this, which is just kind of laying out where these divisions are going to be. So now what we want to do is pull from here, we want to pull these faces downward. Now I can't right click and go to face. Okay, so I'm going to right click, go to face. I can't just click on one of these faces and pull it, because you see how it pulls this edge and it pulls that edge. Okay, so we're going to use a tool called Extrude. And what Extrude does is basically allow us to isolate just this one face and pull that one face straight down. So I'm going to shift click all 4 corners here. Again, look around, make sure we're not selecting anything else. Go to Edit Mesh, go to Extrude, and you'll see that I get this funky manipulator. It has a circle around it, it has a red arrow with a red box, a green arrow with a green box, a blue arrow with a blue box, and then, like I said, that blue manipulator. We don't want to ever grab the middle of this and move it because it'll cause funky things to happen. Whenever I use Extrude, I only use one arrow, and that's this blue one. Okay, so I'm just going to grab the blue arrow and pull it down, and you can see how it pulls all those legs perfectly out. Okay, so now we're setting up the height of the table. Okay, we set up the width and the depth. What's the height of it? Okay, oops. And if I accidentally do that, I just hit undo. Okay, and it gets me back to the tool. So let's say that that's the height. Okay, if we needed to, we can adjust it later. So that's good. So I'm going to right click, go to object mode, click on the table, or click off the table and click back on it. Alright, so there it is. So now I'm just going to go to the move tool and just move this up. I don't like stuff to be sitting below the grid line. So I'm just going to eyeball this until it looks like it's about sitting on the grid. And that looks like it's about sitting on the grid. Okay, so now we have a basic table. So if this is as far as we were going to go, that's as far as we would need to go. Okay, if we wanted to make any alterations to this, we can do that too. If I decided I wanted this table to be a little bit wider or deeper, if I right click and I go to vertices, vertex, I can marquee all the vertices that are here. Oops, don't hit 3. If you do, just hit 1. I can grab all the vertices on one side and I can just move this however far I think I need this to be. The same thing with this one. I can move that however far I think it needs to be. Okay, so we're good. I don't need to adjust it. I think that's probably a good spacing. So now what we need to do is we need to put in this little stacking part that goes on the back. So what we can do is I'm going to go to, I need a division right down here so we can pull this up and extrude it. Okay, well, I can't go back here to this polycube and just add another division because, like we talked about before with history, it'll do stuff like that. Okay, so I have to go to edit mesh, and I'm going to use a tool called insert edge loop tool. Okay, because we want to insert a loop that goes all the way around. So if I find one of these edges that go left to right from the side view, okay, not this way, because I want to insert it going this way, going along it, I'm going to just click and drag on the edge. So it doesn't matter where I click on the edge, but I'm going to click and drag to about where I want that to happen. So I think maybe about there is a good spot. I want to leave myself with plenty of desk room and plenty of book space. And if I need to, I can just switch to the move tool and then adjust this further if I decide I need to adjust it further. Probably about there is good. Okay, so now I have basically this area isolated, so now I can pull those faces up. So I can right click, go back to face, click one face, and then I'm just shift clicking these other pieces. Now I can go to edit mesh, I can go to extrude, and I can just grab the blue arrow, just the blue arrow, not the blue box, not the green, not the red, this blue one, and pull it up. Okay, now if you look at this thing here, we have a couple shelves that are inside this as well. Okay, so we're going to create those with extrudes also, but I want to just kind of lay this out like this. Okay, there's several ways to do it. This is how I'm doing it. Alright, so that looks good. How tall do we want this thing to be? Imagine someone sitting here and they have books. You know, this could be that tall or it could be, you know, whatever. I want to have 2 shelves of books, so I'm going to go to about this height. That height. Okay, and this is just, it's by eye. That's the cool thing about Maya. Alright, so there we're good. So I'm going to right click and go back to object mode. Click off the object, click on the object. Okay, so now I need to insert some divisions so I could push this thing or extrude these things back. So I'm going to go to edit mesh, insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to click about there. Okay, so I have an edge loop going that way. Click about here, click about there, and that should be good. Alright, so I'm going to right click and go back to object mode, switch to the move tool, click off, click back on. Alright, so now we have these divisions. Now you can see this division here looks a bit shorter than that division. Not a big deal. Right click and go to edge, double click this edge, hold down shift, double click that edge, and then we can adjust and even it out. Okay, I could even go to scale if I had them too tight. I can space them apart or whatever. Okay, or I can just double click one and move the one. Alright, so what I'm going to do is grab this and shift double click that. And you'll see what that does is it grabs a region. Let me create a little plane here just so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. Selection is one of the most important things inside Maya. So I'm going to right click and go to edge, and if I double click an edge, you see how it loops straight across. Double click this edge, double click that edge, double click this edge, and so on. If I click this edge and I shift double click this edge, you can see how it selects it just from here to there. Same thing here. If I go to here, hold down shift, double click, it'll create it there. Okay? So that's what I want to do. So I want to just move this stuff over a little bit. So click this one, shift, double click that one, and there we are. So now I can just go to the scale tool and just scale these out a little bit further. Okay? This is basically, imagine like pieces of wood. This wood here would be the same thickness as that wood. Okay? They wouldn't use like super thick wood in one area and super thin wood in another area unless it was for structural purposes, I guess. So I'm just evening it out is all. And then this guy here, I'm just adjusting it. Alright, so now this piece, if I go to faces just so you can see it, this face, and this face look relatively close. They're not going to be exact. We don't need them to be 100% exact. Alright, so now I'm going to right click and go to face. I'm going to click on this face, hold down shift, click on that face, and then I'm going to go to Edit Mesh Extrude. And that brings me back to the Extrude tool. So I can grab the blue arrow and just push it in. Okay, I don't want to go that far back, obviously. I want to go basically until I can see that I've gone too far, and then I pull it forward until, there it is, until we can see it. Okay, now I know that that's a good amount of distance back. Alright, so now we have this extruded. The thicknesses are about the same. We're pretty good. Alright. So here's, I'm going to right click on this and go back to object mode and click off, click back on. There we go. Alright, so now here's where history is kind of cool too, is that looking at this thing, we'd say, okay, well now that we've got a basic table here, what if we wanted to taper the legs now? We could right click and go to face, grab the face and scale it, but you see that we have to do that for each individual one, and again, how are we going to ensure that we're accurate? We can't grab all four and scale, because then it scales them towards the middle. That looks funky. Okay, so what we can do is, going back to object mode, is if I go over here in my list of things that I've done, and I remember where certain things are at. This poly extrude face right here, if I click on it, is this very first extrude that we pulled down. So if I click on that, it's kind of unintuitive as to, you know, I want to do something, so what buttons do I push here? Well, if I click the T button on the keyboard, it brings me back to that manipulator that I originally used to pull these things out. So what I can do at this point is go in here, click the blue box, that brings up this little scale manipulator. See, if I click on the arrow, let me zoom in so you can see it. I click the arrow, I have this open box. I click the blue box, I get a scale box. I click the circle and I get a scale manipulator. I click back on one of the I click back on one of the scale manipulators and I get the scale manipulator. Okay, so this is a universal manipulator is what it's called. So if I click on this blue box and I click and drag on this inner box, it'll scale all three of these and give my legs a little bit of a tapered look to it. Okay, so they have a little bit of design, so it's not just like blah. Okay, don't go too much, because then it'll look like high heels. No table would have that. Okay, just subtle is all that's needed. So that's good there. So now to get rid of that, we just switch back to the move tool, click off, click back on. There's a lot of clicking off and clicking back on just to kind of reset your view. Alright, so there, our table's done. So now let's go and name this. So I'm going to go over here to my table and name it table. We're done with the history of this, minus one more thing. If I were to go through and just render this thing, okay, you're not going to render this, but just so you can see it, it looks pretty boring. Okay, it doesn't look like there's a lot of finesse to this, a lot of fanciness. So what we're going to do is add a bevel to it. Alright, so a bevel is going to take these hard edges that we saw in this render view, and it's just going to add a little bit of softness to it. Okay, so we're going to go to Mesh, Edit Mesh, and go to Bevel. Okay, And what this does, like I said, is just breaks up the surface, just so it's not perfectly solid corners in there. Now this is probably a little bit too big, so I'm going to go to my poly bevel. I'm going to go to offset, and I'm just going to lower it, 0.2, maybe 0.1, and then I'll add an extra segment in there. Okay. Now what that's doing, let me go to an actual cube. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, go to Bevel. Okay, so what it does, it takes the corners and it just basically chops them in 45-degree angles. The offset controls how far away it's cutting that. The segments controls how many divisions we have there. The more segments we have, the smoother that's going to look. Okay, that started off as a cube with just a bevel. We could also play with the roundness of it, but I really haven't found that this does anything. There's an auto tolerance, there's some other stuff. Realistically, you only have to play with offset and segments. Those are the two that I typically play with. Okay, so now there's the desk. We have our bevel, it's good. I can delete the history. There we go. And we've named it. That's good there. And now I'm going to put it on the layer. So I'm going to go over here to my layers with the object selected. Click the new layer button. And we'll call this desk. Hit save. And now I can turn it off or turn it on using this little button. Okay, so there's our desk. And again, if I needed to adjust anything, I can go to vertices, grab the vertices, and say I need this to be shorter or longer, or whatever the case is going to be. I don't like how deep this is. Okay, it's all in isolating those vertices. Now I'm not here trying to marquee those vertices, because then I'm going to grab a bunch of vertices I don't need, and then it's going to mess up how this looks. Okay, I've created this thing basically in just sections so that it's easy for me to just adjust where the positionings of these things are. Even the shelf height, if I really needed to, I could grab. Be careful about it. But I can grab all the points associated with that shelf height and adjust how big that shelf height is. Okay. Alright, so there we go. Cool beans. Turn it off, turn it back on, whatever. Alright. So now we're going to create a chair for this. So I want to see the desk just at the start of this at least, so I can see where to position the chair. So I'm going to save my work. File, save scene. File, save scene as. And it says desk startup. So now I'm just going to call this chair startup. Okay. So now we're going to go to create polygon cube. We scale it down. I'm going to pull it out here just so we can get it where we need it to be. And pull it up. And all we're going to do is similar to the desk, is we're going to set up where the person would be sitting. Okay, and this is just a standard like wooden chair. I'll show you the picture of it. They do the book first. Alright, there we go. There's the chair. So it's basically just like a wooden chair. So basically set this up to where the height of the chair is going to be, about there. The thickness of it. I left this one square because most chairs are about square. It might be a little bit, you know, this way or that way, but depending on the chair. But that's about the thickness that I want. So I'm going to go to Polycube. I'm going to go to the width, add 2 divisions for the width, go to the depth, 2 divisions for depth. Okay, our tic-tac-toe board again. Right click and go to edge, double click this edge, hold down shift, double click that edge, and scale it out. Okay, now these are going to be the leg posts, so these are probably going to be thinner than the table one. So we just grab those edges again. Okay, let's try that and see how that works. So I'm going to go to faces, grab this face, shift click this face, shift click this face, shift click that face. Go to extrude, and oops, hit undo because I missed it. Pull it down. Okay. pretty good. We'll give the legs a little bit of a taper. So we can, another way we can do that instead of clicking on the blue and scaling it down is over here there actually is a taper. So if I type in 0.8, 0.9, alright, doesn't want to work. I clicked something wrong. Whatever. So we'll click the blue and scale it down. I think this is for something else when you extrude a different way. So again, a subtle taper, nothing crazy. There we go. Good. So back to object mode. Click on it, click off it, click on it. There we go. That looks pretty good so far. So let me go to Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop. Now we're going to do the back of the chair. So I'm just going to insert another loop right about here. Okay, just so I have something to pull up about there. And then I think maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that should work there. Actually, no. Let's get rid of that. Okay. It's a good time to start doing this. Is how do we get rid of an edge once we have it in there? Okay. If I have an edge, I don't like the edge. I want to make sure I double click the edge. If I hit the delete key, you can see I deleted the edge, but the shape is still there. Okay. And the reason for that is if I go to vertex, the vertices are still there. Okay. So anytime you delete an edge, you want to go to Edit Mesh and go down to Delete Edge Vertex, which you see the shortcut key is Control Delete, and that'll get rid of it. Okay, so we're going to use this edge actually, and I'm just going to scoot this edge a bit forward. Okay, just those three pieces. I just want to have a little bit more thickness in the back than the front where the legs are at. Okay, and I don't need to grab this whole edge. It'll let me select it all and pull all this because I'm going to get that weirdness. Okay, so I just want that. So now we can go to faces. I'm going to grab not all the faces, just these. Maybe a little bit more thickness here. Let me go to edge, click, click, and scale these two guys in a little bit. I'm just giving these back pieces here just a little bit more thickness. That's all, because that's going to be where we pull up these back braces. Alright, so now we'll go to extrude and we'll grab the blue arrow and just pull it up. Alright, so now that we have that pulled up, how far do we want to go? Same thing, we just kind of eyeball where this is going. Alright, maybe about there. Okay, we can always adjust this stuff later also. Okay, so now I'm going to add some divisions here. So if I look at the end result of this chair, you can see it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divisions, okay, or 6 lines. So if I go to divisions, we already have 1, so I'm going to add 7, and that will give me 6 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. That's what we want. You see there's 2 lines for each one of these bars that goes across. These 2 lines go across, these 2 lines go across, these 2 lines go across. Okay, so now we have those. So now we just need to right click and go to edge and just space these out. So now I'm just going to double click the edges to select them on both sides and then just adjust where this is going to be. Okay, you see this little gap right here, so I want to have that be my little gap, so pull that up. And then this to that one is going to be a bar. And then these 4 are going to be a bar, so I'm actually just going to grab all 4 of these, scale how big I want the bar to be, maybe like that, and then move this into position. Same thing here. Move it and try to scale it to about the same size. There we go. Alright. So now we need to basically connect this face with that face. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and go to face. And I'm going to click on this face, shift click that face, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and there's a tool called Bridge. So I'm going to go to Smooth Path in the option box and hit Bridge. Alright, so that bridges it, that connects these together. And what it does is it creates this these panels here. We can come over to twist just so you can see what these do. And twist is going to twist it like that. And taper will make it bigger or smaller. Okay, without us actually having to go and adjust those properties. This one is basically straight across, but I like it to be a little bit fancier. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at a little bit of taper, like 0.6. And divisions is just how many divisions are there. If there's 0 divisions, there's no taper. If I add 1 division, we get that. 2 divisions, 3 divisions. The more divisions we have, the smoother it's going to be, but the harder it's going to be to work with, the longer it's going to take to render. So actually at 5, we were probably pretty good. There we go. So I'm going to go to Face, grab the next one, shift click the next one, and go to Edit Mesh Bridge again. Okay. This one, I don't think I want to do anything with. I like the top one to be a little bit fancier, and not so much the bottom two. Okay, and then we'll just do another bridge right in the last one. Edit Mesh Bridge again. Okay, so now if we go to Object Mode, and we click on it, there's our fancier chair. Now I'm going to make it even more fancy, and make it contoured. This looks like a terribly uncomfortable chair to sit in. So I'm going to go to, I'm actually going to go to the top view. So I'm going to hold down the space bar, I'm going to click and hold on the Maya button and go to top view. Okay, and I hit F to frame it, and there it is. Okay, so now what we're looking at is the exact top of that chair. So I'm going to go right click and go to vertex, and this is the back of the chair here. Okay, these are the pieces that we just put in. So I'm going to grab opposite ones, this one and that one. I'm going to pull them back slightly. I'm going to grab the next two, pull them back slightly, but even a little bit more. Grab the next row, which is the middle, and kind of make it a little bit even, but not exactly. Okay, you can see how I'm not pulling it back here, so this is a straight line. I want this to be more like a bow. Okay, and we switch back to perspective view by holding the space bar, holding on Maya, and then perspective view. Okay, so that's what this did, was just added a little bit of contour to it. Okay, just a little bit of niceness. Alright, now for this, I want to fancy this up even more. So I'm going to take these here. Actually, I don't grab anything else. And I'm just going to pull this up. I'm going to grab the next two rows. Make sure I didn't grab anything else. Sometimes it helps to be kind of zoomed in and in wireframe. And pull that up more. Grab the next two. And pull that down a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to grab this whole mess of points that are in the middle and just lift this all up. Okay. So now we get this nice little arch right here. That's what I was after. Back to object mode. And there we go. So now we have a semi-fancy chair. Okay. We could do other stuff to this too if this was actually like a production chair that we were going to be using in a shot. We may want to do other things. Like the wood wouldn't just come right out here like this. There'd be like a little notch or something. So it's cool for what we needed to do. Okay. I think I'm going to make this a little bit thicker on the bottom. Just I'm not liking how thin the legs are now with how thick the top is. So I'm just going to go and grab this edge here, because what I want to do is pull it in like this. Okay. So I'm just going to do that to all of these. As I'm grabbing that edge. And I'm just using shift, making sure I don't grab anything else, and grab the blue scale and just pull it in a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to go the other way just so we don't have rectangular legs. There we go. So I left the taper on the bottom. It works. There we go. Back to object mode. And there's our chair. Okay. So now the chair's done. Except for that bevel, because we're going to have the same issue that we had before with the bevel. Alright, so we have our chair. We're going to need to add the bevel to this. Now, I'm going to duplicate my chair just so you can see this. And it's always best to kind of duplicate, so I hit Control D. When you're going to do something that you're just not entirely sure how it's going to look. Okay. So I've duplicated the chair. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, go to Bevel, and I'm going to do basically the same kind of settings, 0.2 and 2 divisions. click off, and now you're going to see that what I'm getting here is I'm getting a bunch of faceting. Okay, that's called faceting when you can see the individual faces of this. Because this bevel on here is on every single one of our edges, we get this like weird funky look. Okay, and ideally what we want is we want to keep this stuff nice and smooth. Okay, what we don't want to do is have those facets all over the place. Alright, so I'm going to delete that. I'll duplicate this one and I'll scoot it back and we'll do it again, but the correct way. Alright, so now we can right click and go to edge, and I can add a bevel just to certain pieces of this. Alright, but this can be very, very difficult to kind of isolate the exact pieces. So it's actually a little bit easier, I think, to marquee everything and then deselect the stuff we don't want. Okay, so the deselect button is control. So I hold control and I double click, and I'm just double clicking these edges here. Okay, I don't want the vertical edges to be faceted or to be beveled. So I'm just control double clicking. Go down to the next one. Control double click those. Okay. So now that should be pretty good. Alright, it's going to bevel these ones here. Alright, so we're just going to let it bevel those ones just because of the kind of flow that we're going to get. And also this scene isn't going to be terribly complex. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything if we deselect these. Okay, and realistically we should kind of deselect those two if we want to get rid of all these. Okay, so there's actually an easier way. If I just control and marquee, you can see how I can deselect a lot of these things. Okay, so I'm doing this just so you can see that, you know, if this is an actual piece you'd want to use, let's say in your demo reel, portfolio, whatever, take the time to do this because it's really going to pay off, and it's going to look a lot better as far as the render time. You probably won't really notice anything inside the scene. Don't need one there. And always look for symmetry because you want it to be symmetrical. Something on the back, that. Okay, now you can't do, one of the bad things about beveling is that you can't do it like in pieces. You have to kind of do all your beveling in one shot. Alright, so that should be good. I'm not going to worry about this stuff down here. Alright, so now let's just go through and do one more double check. I think it's good. Edit mesh bevel. Let's do 2 segments, and I don't even think I want to knock this down any. I think it's good there. So I'm going to go to object mode and click off, click back on, or click off and leave it off, and I can look at it. I think 1 is going to be better. Sometimes with beveling, you'll get this funky stuff that happens. Let me show you what it looks like in the corner here, like that. Okay, so I'm just going to keep it at 1. And that'll be sufficient. Alright, so there we go. So we have this nice chair. It's nicely beveled. Because I went to 1, I'm going to take this down to 0.3. On the legs, I'm getting a little bit of thinness. And I think I'm going to take the vertices of this base part here and just pull it down a little bit. Give myself a little bit of thickness. Okay. And then now that I'm also looking at this, I think I want to have a little dip here. The modeling process is never ending. So insert edge loop, which is under edit mesh, insert edge loop. I want to insert an edge loop right down the middle here. So I'm going to click and click. Okay, so I have basically a plus. So I'm going to go over here to the channel box and go to the poly split ring and just make sure these are both set to 0.5. By putting it at 0.5, it gives us guarantees that we're basically like locked right into the center. Okay, because it's halfway is what that weight is. So now I can go to vertices and just grab the top ones. Okay, see, I grab those top points, and I'm just going to pull it down a little bit. Okay, and then I also added the ones here. This one's gonna be a little bit trickier to grab, but I want to grab these two and these two. Okay, basically the top 2 points here. I could also just go to the Q select tool and just shift click these, and then I'm just going to nudge them down a little bit. That's all I wanted to do, just to kind of keep it nice and flowy. Alright, right click back to object mode, click on it, click off of it. I think that's a pretty decent chair, with the exception of this back vertice. I want to just scoot up. I think I like that to be straight. There we go. Okay, so now here's my old chair, here's my beveled chair. I like to keep both around. So I'm going to take this beveled chair. So I'm going to take this old chair and I'm going to make a new layer here and just call it old stuff. Okay, and I'm going to delete the history on this because I'm done with the history of that object. And I can hide it. And now here's my actual chair I want to keep. So I'm going to delete the history on this. I'm going to label it. If I can move my mouse over here, chair. And then I'll make a new layer and we'll call this chair. Oops. And because I already labeled this chair, then it doesn't like me labeling that chair. So sometimes I just call it chair underscore layer. Remember, no spaces, always underscores. How did I get away with that in the desk? Oh, because I call it table and then I call it desk. Whatever. Alright, so now we have a chair, we have a desk. Just for fun, I'll show you under Window, General Editor, Visor. There's bonus stuff. You don't do this. I don't want you to do this. This is going to cause other stuff to happen. But if you want to play with it in another scene, there's these people under the mocap examples. I middle drag the walk sit guy. And he's huge. There he is. And I'm just going to scale the guy down until he's about the size that we need. I'm going to give myself some more frames. There you go. So now this guy's sitting down. So now I can just say, okay, buddy, pull up a chair. So now that he's pulled up a chair, I can basically, I'm kind of looking at this and saying, okay, well, you know, is this the correct size that I want this guy to be and this chair to be and all this other stuff? Or does it look out of proportion? I think it's actually a pretty good thing. Even though his butt's like sticking through the ground there, I could always scoot this up a little bit. And maybe just for fun, just rotate his feet down. He does have his knees kind of in the air. Okay. So that's about the right size for a person to be sitting in the chair. Alright, so it's always fun just to kind of see those things. And this is actually just for fun's sake. This is motion captured stuff. So this is someone actually recorded someone walking and sitting down. Walked right through the table. Fine. Just for time being, I'll just rotate the table around and put it here. And here he goes off to work. Sitting on this. A funny story about this guy is that one year we did bathrooms. We modeled the toilet. And then we brought this guy in just for sizing purposes, and he walked right into the bathroom and sat down. There was no planning involved in it. It was just by accident, and it worked out perfectly. Alright, and I'm just going to make sure the guy's deleted, which he is. Good. Okay. And I can re-rotate this back to there. Alright, so everything's good here. We have our two layers. I'm just going to reset my position in Z. There we go. Alright, so now this is where you're at. You have a table, you have a chair, we have the two layers. I'm going to save it, and then go to Save As. Alright, so we're at Save As. I'm going to save this as Book Startup. And we're going to model the book now. So we're going to model a book. This is a very super duper basic book. And you'll see we started this with a cube, we started this with a cube, we're starting the book with a cube also. Okay. I'm just going to scoot the cube up Alright, so I'm sizing the book up to be the height that I need and the width. And this is where the book's going to go, so obviously I can't have the book be bigger than this. And obviously books come in different widths and depths and all that stuff. So this should be a very generic book. Okay, something like this. And a little bit deeper, like that. Alright, that'll work. Okay, and if I had a bunch of these there, perfect. So I can turn off my chair layer, turn off my desk layer. Now I have this book layer. So now I'm going to just add some divisions here. So the way that we're going to set this up is we're basically just going to create a very generic looking book where we have just like the binding here, or the binding back here, whatever it is, and then we have the paper in the middle, that kind of thing. So I'm going to add a couple divisions here. I think 3 is probably going to be good. The height, I really don't need a lot of divisions. The depth, I do. So I'm adding them in the width, 4 in the width. And let's see, there's the binding, there's the paper. I get rid of that. There we go. So I'm going to do 4, 5 in the width, 4 in the depth. Okay. Now for this, I want to go to a top view. I'm going to go to the top view, hold down the space bar, hold down the left mouse on Maya, go to top view. Hit F so we can see it, and there it is. Okay. So I'm going to take all these divisions here. So I'm going to right click and go to vertex. I'm going to marquee all those middle ones. Okay. And you have to marquee because if I click, there's a division on the bottom of this. Okay. Because we have a division up here and we have a division down there. And we have to make sure it's symmetrical. So go back to the top view, marquee all these, go to my scale tool, and I'm just scaling it in the one direction. And then I'll pull it back like that. Oops. Okay, I'm going to take this one here. I'm just going to scoot that one down to that side. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is make this look like a book. So I'm going to take these two, go to my scale tool, and just grab the blue and scale it in. Go to the move tool and pull it in. Grab this one, pull it out a little bit. So now we're creating that binding area of the book. I'm going to take this one, shift click this one, or shift marquee these two, and then scale these ones in like this. And then these two are just going to be transitional adjustments, kind of like that. Okay, so now we have basically the binding area of this book. This here and this here are going to be scaled outward. This one and this one is going to be scaled outward. This one and this one are going to be scaled outward. And I'm going to pull these back as well. Okay, so we have something like that. That's our shape. Okay, so we have basically what this part is here. This is the actual book cover and the book backing and the book, whatever the back part is called. And then all this stuff right there is the paper. Okay, it's a very simple model. It's a little bit tricky to get this stuff laid out again. All right, let me undo that just so you can see it again. Okay. There we go. So I'm grabbing these two here, and I'm scaling these in just to bring them closer and rounding this off. I'm grabbing this one and pulling it out. That gives me this nice rounding here. I marquee these two, and I scale those in. That gives me the little dip that the book has where it bends. And then the rest of this is just going to be kind of outlining where the book cover and the book backing are. There we go. Okay. A lot of stuff we've already done on the other ones, just a matter of now we're doing it to the book. So now we need to, if we look at this from perspective view, this looks like an okay book. Nothing too fancy, but it still needs a little bit more definition. It actually looks like a loaf of bread. So let's go to the top view again. We're going to go to faces. I'm going to marquee all the paper faces. Okay, so I'm marking all of these faces on the inside. If I switch back to perspective just so you can see, I have all of those faces there, nothing on the other area. Now I can extrude, edit mesh, extrude. Again, I grab just the blue and pull it down. And this is going to be how deep the paper is going to go, or how deep the cover is compared to the paper. So something like that is sufficient. Okay. Now I do get a little bit of weirdness. I'm going to switch to my front view, Maya front view, hit F to frame it, and I'm going to hit wireframe in 4 mode. So if I look over here, you can see how this paper goes from here, and then it goes up, and then it goes back down. So that's just a weird, funky thing it does. So I'm going to right click and go to vertex, grab this vertice, and just pull it down. Grab this vertice, pull it down. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Okay, I'm just going to grab this one, pull it up. Grab this one, pull it up. There we go. Back to perspective view, back to object mode, and there's our book. Okay, so now we can take this and we're going to put it on our shelf, which it actually should be already in the shelf. There we go, but we modeled it backwards, no big deal. We'll just rotate it around 180 degrees in the Y direction. Okay, now eventually we'll populate this thing with more books, but we're going to keep it right there for now. Okay. We're going to do one more thing with this too, is that I like my pivots to be in certain areas. So before we quit this scene out, we're going to move our pivots to all of the correct areas. So this here being right where it is, I don't like that. I want it down here in this area. So I'm going to hold down the D on the keyboard, the V on the keyboard, and just middle mouse button, click and drag, and you can see how it pops it right into that corner. Okay, so now my pivot's there. Let me turn on my chair and my desk. My desk's pivot is going to be in the same area, bottom left. So hold down DV, middle click and drag, there it is. My chair is going to be on, let's see, this one's not so important. I'll just move it down here, DV, middle to click and drag, and there it is. Okay, D is your pivot tool. V is your point snapping tool. So you can see how I'm snapping to points. When I combine them, DV, I can move my pivot to any of the points. Even I can move them to points on this stuff. Okay, there we go. Now here's the reason that we did that for the book, is that when I duplicate this and I scoot it over, I can say, you know, I want this book to be maybe a little bit thicker or thinner. I can scale it down, and scale it down, and scale it down right from here. And I don't have to move it. If I had the pivot, let me duplicate this one and center pivot it. If I had the pivot in the center and I wanted to shrink it, I shrink it and shrink it. You see it's like floating now, so then I have to move it down, and I have to move it over, I have to move it in. Okay, so it just makes more sense to have it in that bottom left corner. Okay, now had I duplicated this, just so you can see it, had I created this over here, I would have put my pivot, let me hide the desk so you can see this better, I would have put the pivot over in this side. Okay, that way when I duplicate, I'm basically lining up the sides of this and then scaling it down. Okay, the other side wouldn't work. Alright, so if you want to duplicate a couple books, we're going to delete them later because we have to do some other work to it. Alright, so let's delete the history on our book. Let's go to here, we'll call it book, we'll make a new layer, book underscore layer, and save. Okay, so we have book layer, chair layer, we have our old stuff layer, which I'm going to click and just move to the bottom by using this. The order doesn't matter, it's just a matter of keeping the stuff that I like together. Okay. That's good. I'm also going to go into the outliner. So window outliner, or that button that we made in the shelf. And here's our table. Here's P cube. I'm just going to rename this old chair. That's what that is. Except I spelled it ood chair. And here's the regular chair, and here's the book. I'm just going to middle drag old chair below this. There we go. So table, chair, book. Good. So now we save. And now we're ready to move on to the next part of this.